Welcome back. Coach D, how we doing?
How we doing? Bright and early.
Bright and early, ready to go. Today we have a fantastic guest, head coach at Kean University, Coach Garrett. Been in the game for a long time, had a tremendous amount of success, but not just a college coach, but also a mentor to a lot of guys just like yourself, right, Coach?
Yeah.
And you could talk about a little bit about that as well, before we bring Coach on, how you know Coach originally and got connected with him as a player, right?
Correct.
That whole experience.
Yeah, so Coach Garrett and I go way back to when I was being recruited out of high school. He was originally from, obviously he played at Montclair State, so he was an alum there, and then ended up getting into the Kean head coaching job. So it was kind of part of the whole recruiting process for me. And then ultimately, I ended up playing against him as a head coach for 3 years when he was at Kean still, and then just kind of developed that relationship as a mentor, kind of continuing to speak and he was very open always about any questions I had in terms of coaching or any of that kind of stuff when I started to get after I finished playing and whatnot, and has just always been a great guy. Was always there, any type of questions, whether it be on the field, off the field. And I think that's really kind of the type of coach that he is. And he'll speak to it, I'm sure, as well. The D3 world is a little different, so you can develop different types of, I just feel like different relationships. And, like I said, he's been a mentor on and off the field, from day one. So excited to have him on, excited to kind of hear some of his viewpoints on some of the things that we talk about on a regular basis from a D3 aspect and whatnot. He also has a son that just went through the process in terms of he's graduating, going to Monmouth University, and he's got another one who just enrolled in high school who's a freshman. So, he kind of sees a lot of sides to this whole thing. And, I think our viewers are going to get a little something out of it.
Absolutely. Let's bring Coach on right now, and talk more to him. And Coach, what's going on? Great to see you.
What's up, guys? Good morning. Thanks for having me. Always great being around you two.
Coach, appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I think, and I was just talking to the guy I was playing pickleball with this morning, my next door neighbor. He had a couple kids that played college sports, played soccer. One played soccer Division I, the other one played Division III basketball. And I was letting him know that we were going to have you on, and I was telling him about this, not just the success you have, but how college football, even at Division III level, has changed over the years. And it's been interesting because as you go through it over the years, you've been in the game for a long time, but one of the things that you've had a tremendous amount of is stability at one spot, which, for lack of a better word, is today's college football unusual, right? So, and not unusual from a wins and losses standpoint, I'm talking, but guys are always looking to go to the next thing, more along those lines. But you've had a tremendous amount of success. You've been in a place that really established a program, and because of that, in New Jersey, everybody knows, Coach Garrett and what you've been able to do. And I've had quite a few players that have gone on and play for you, have had a lot of success. First of all, welcome to the podcast. Just kind of walk everyone through a little bit about your career. How you got to Kean, your years at Montclair State, those kind of things.
Yeah. So it's crazy. Derek talked about playing at Montclair State. And as soon as I got done playing my senior year, I thought about, what am I going to do now? And Coach Giannicola, obviously one of the best to ever do it in Division III football. I was fortunate to play for him and surrounded by a lot of great people. He asked me to coach, and I didn't hesitate, didn't pause, didn't ask how much, didn't care about the salary. I said, yeah, and didn't hesitate. And then from there, 1997 was my first year coaching linebackers at Montclair State. And then 2 years later, my mentor, Billy Johnson, leaves and takes a head high school job at Passaic Valley. And I'm 25 years old, and Coach Giannicola is asking me to be his defensive coordinator. And Dave, you know this, and both of you. At that time, I thought I knew everything. I knew nothing. I just said, absolutely, what a great opportunity to be a coordinator not at my age, but the school where I played, and grew right up, right down the street in Clifton, New Jersey. And, that's kind of how it started. Defensive coordinator at Montclair State. And then our offensive coordinator at the time, Charlie Kakuza, gets a head job at Kean. And in 2003, I was part-time at Montclair, and I never asked. I didn't care about the money. I think I paid $3,000 to be the defensive coordinator at Montclair State part-time, and I didn't care. It was never about the money for me. So in 2002 off season, I had a chance to go to Police Academy, Port Authority Police Academy. My family's big Port Authority cops. Everyone's involved there. Me and my brother took the test. We were going to go in the same academy. I get asked to go be the full-time assistant at Kean with Charlie Kakuza, and I probably took about a $70,000 pay cut to turn down that Police Academy job to go coach at Kean. Again, it wasn't about money. I just couldn't see my life without football. To take an assistant job for $29,000 at the time. And then 3 years as a D coordinator at Kean. In 2006, I had a phenomenal opportunity to be elevated. And then this is going to be my 18th season as a head coach at Kean. And Dave, I think we met probably somewhere around 2004 when you first did one of your first showcases at Kean back then.
Yep. We were running, you let us run that Ultimate 100 camp.
Yep.
And the kids came in from all over the country.
All over.
It was, at the time, I didn't expect it to be the way that it was, but it was kind of one of the early booms in that whole kind of space. And there were so many kids that went on to actually even the NFL that played in that thing. I look back at the videos now at this day too, and how different it was. We used to let kids, if they wanted to take their shirt off to run the 40-yard dash, we said, all right, I guess, if that helps you run faster, now everybody has to wear, required uniforms and all that kind of stuff. But that was a launching pad. And I remember that was, you really had just gotten that brand new facility, I think, which was phenomenal for Division III at the time. There wasn't too many facilities like that. With the scoreboard and the field, and then the field house, just absolutely, beautiful facility. But it was interesting because it was one of the first. Montclair, obviously, with Coach Ian Cola, that was an established Division III program. The home of Sam Mills, and had a phenomenal reputation. And you brought a lot of the things that you guys had at Montclair to Kean, and then put your spin on it and really developed a fantastic program at Kean University. And like I said, Kevin Hines, he probably graduated. Was he graduated yet, Kevin Hines?
Yeah, I know he God, it's been a while now, but Kevin was a heck of a player for us. He came when you coached up there. He came in as a freshman and started for us right away at center. He was a great kid. Yeah.
That's incredible. So, that's what I loved about the way that you recruited. I took over at Indian Hills. We were not a very good team. We were trying to build it up at the time, and then ended up going to Red Bank Regional. But Kevin Hines himself was the quintessential player that I think does really well with you. He came from a program that at the time, really didn't have a lot of players come out of it. Every once in a while we have one or two players, but it didn't have a lot of players that came out of it. He himself was not just a competitor and a really good player, but was driven and was a really good leader. And you were able to find those qualities in him. And I remember his recruiting process, he had really high expectations, and you did a great job in showing him that Kean was the right program for him, which I think is so important nowadays. And it'll probably eventually get us to where we talk about the transfer portal and NIL, but that's one of the things that kids don't do as often as they should. Find the right program for them. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and it's such a great point because again, the old man in the room here, and Dave, when we were in high school, there was no internet, no social media, no platform like this where everyone thinks they got to compare and contrast themselves. And if they're not getting validated to go Division I, they're not good enough. And it couldn't be, in my opinion, any more not true. We talk from the very beginning in recruiting with parents and kids and players. we talk about, is it the right fit? Is it the right fit for you, number one, first and foremost, for our level financially? Is it the right fit for you academically and then athletically? And really in that order, because if football, you know this, man, they go to camp, they go away. Every kid thinks about in the first 7 days, I don't love football anymore. This isn't for me. I'm not made for this. And, it's just feelings, and you can't act on feelings. But those things become important, because if your mom and dad or whoever you live with, your single parent, your aunt, your grandma can't afford it, it's only going to be a disaster from the first day in the door on if you can't pay bills. And then two, academically, because you are setting yourself up for life, with a piece of paper, and a piece of paper isn't the end all be all, but the piece of paper opens doors for you. And I'm a perfect example. I hated everything about school, and I tell my guys this all the time. There was one reason I went to college, and it was to play football. And ultimately, as you grow up and you mature, you realize that you need to do certain things to set yourself up for success. And if I didn't have that little piece of paper, my dad was a plumber, right? And he didn't go to college, but we had a great childhood. So the piece of paper isn't everything. But for me specifically, if I didn't have that piece of paper, I coach football for a living. I've only coached at 2 schools, and this is year 21 at Kean University. So without that piece of paper in 2002 going on an interview, I'm not even sitting here. I'm probably in the police academy. So, and then when you talk about, and Derek mentioned earlier, my son just went through it. I told him, I don't care about anything. I don't care about levels. I don't care about it all. We entertained everybody. Go where you're wanted, go where people want you, and go be around good dudes, period. And I'm telling you, we took trips up to Vermont to the NESCAC schools in Division III, the high academics, and all the way, all around the country. And that's all I cared about as a dad who's been around this game for so long. Go be around good people and go where you're wanted. Because if you're not wanted, it's going to be disaster. And how do you know if you're not wanted anymore? That's a great question. You got to really trust your gut, because unfortunately there's some snake oil salesmen out there who tell people whatever they want to hear. And that's, we start the recruiting process. We tell them, like, hey man, how is trust established? And everyone looks at you, kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, well, it's a repeated experience over time, right? So if I lie to you on day one of recruiting you, and then you figured out at some point, 6 months, 2 years from now, that I'm a liar, well, our relationship's never taken off the ground, and it's built on nothing that's worth anything. So, it's the recruiting so crazy. It's just, you got to figure it out for yourself. Who do you think is real? Who do you think is genuine? Who's a good dude? How do you do that? You lean on guys like you, guys who've been around, maybe your high school coaches who know people who've been around. You have to ask, you got to do your homework, but it's all about the right fit, man. And you got to go where you're wanted. If you don't go where you're wanted, it's such, in my opinion, it's just not ever going to be a great experience.
I think the two things you said are the most important things. And I think it trickles down to all levels. I'm actually, and Derek will tell you this, I'm doing this already with my 8-year-old, because as he's going to do different things, he's a good athlete, and going where you're wanted and being around good people are really so important. I mean, Derek could tell you, tell you offline, like in youth sports, the things I'm already experiencing with my 8-year-old, I'm already like, okay, people are like, oh, why do you want him to play over here? Or if I'm not coaching, for example, well, because I think these guys are going to take care of him and they want him to be on their team. Like, I want you want people that want you there, and that changes your experience completely. It's a huge thing in recruiting now, because guys are chasing people that don't want them. I'll make it even simpler. If you're trying to date a girl, okay, and she does not want you, even if she goes out on a date with you, she's thinking about somebody else, right? So find the girl that wants to be with you, that thinks that you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and that way, that gives you, doesn't mean you're going to have success. There's no guarantee, but it's going to give you a better chance for success.
Yeah, and Dave, you said it, because even when you talk about recruiting, and this is year 18 and 21 years at Kean, I've never promised a single kid playing time. And we had transfers from Jason Gwaltney, Long Island, who went to West Virginia, started over Steve Slayton. And when I first talked to him, I said, look, I'm not promising you anything. If you're the best guy, you're going to play. And that's really what we've said in my entire tenure. Like, if you're the best guy, we're going to play you. But to get you to come here, I don't have a crystal ball, because what if something changes? What if someone else comes who's better than you? And I think that has a lot to do. And not everybody wants that, though. Everyone wants to be. There's some kids now who just say, "Hey, I want it," and if you're not telling me that, I'm not coming, and I'm okay with that, because, at the end of the day, I tell my own kids, just like you, your 8-year-old, like, there's only one thing that's going to work for you, and it's hard work. And if hard work, and if you're working as hard as you possibly can, and it's not good enough, that just means someone's better than you. It doesn't mean you stink. It doesn't mean your value goes down. It just means you're on a team and someone might be better than you. You have to be okay with that in today's world. In today's world, it's not okay because there's so many expectations in these youth sports, as you brought up, that little Johnny at 8 is going to be playing at Notre Dame. Well, what if little Johnny's not playing at Notre Dame when he's 18? He's not a good son anymore. So we talk about these things in recruiting, and I tell my guys, the one thing, we're not trying to sell anybody on anything because, again, we're not salesmen, right? And I know that sounds a little like whatever, and there's nothing wrong with being a salesman. My point is, we are going to tell you exactly what we are, who we are, what we do. And if it's not good enough for you, that's okay because it's not a good fit. And if it's not a good fit for you, again, you don't want us, we don't want you, because eventually if you come here, it's not a good fit for you. That's not going to be a great experience for any of us. It's going to be nothing but conflict and trying to resolve issues. And, I think that's the big thing that maybe some people got away from, especially maybe, I don't know, because I've never coached higher, but, I think people get caught up in that because you have to get the best, because if you don't win, right, you're gone. And I understand that. I have plenty of friends who've been through it and experienced that. And you have to do whatever you have to do to get the best recruit. That's kind of one reason why I've never left Division III. I never wanted to have my family move around the country and live out of a suitcase every 2 or 3 years. I got plenty of friends who we've had the conversations, plenty of friends who've offered me positions. But sure, it'd be great to be somewhere for a year or two, but am I going to be there for 21 years? I mean, I still got an 8-year-old, I got an 18-year-old, an 8-year-old, and my 14-year-old. So it's always been about quality of life.
Right, Coach. And I think that's where you're different. And just this profession itself is different in itself, right? Because, everybody wants to get to that next level or continue to pursue their career and move up the ranks. But that, grass isn't always greener, right? At the end of the day, our job, our livelihood, putting food on the table for your family still depends on an 18-year-old, 20-year-old kid playing ball, playing a game. Right. And sometimes those things just don't work out well. So, for you to stay at a program for as long as you have with those opportunities really kind of says something about who you are as a person and then overall just the program in general.
Yeah. And listen, I think that, again, I'm very fortunate, very blessed. I think Kean still wants me over his tenure. And when I say that, it's because when we first walked in the door, Derek, and I played against Kean, I only knew Kean as an opponent for 4 years as a player and 7 years as a coach. So I knew that myself.
And doormat for most of it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it didn't mean it had bad dudes. It just means there was never a stability, right? When you talk about that, we got in there and our team GPA in 2003, when I first got there, that team GPA was under a 1.7. And we walked in the doors in that spring of 2003. We lost 39 players because they were under 2.0 and they were academically eligible. And we're talking about they had some dudes, and Kean always had dudes, right? But the thing in college football, if you can't get that dude from year 1 to year 2 and then year 3 to year 4, like year 4 is what matters. Year 4 is where you're going to win. And we definitely had some highs and lows, but the main thing, we've been able to have stability. Our graduation rate now, we graduate almost 8 out of every 10 kids. We're 77, 78%, give or take. And that number gets skewed because in Division III, if you can't afford it, right, that goes against you because they can't come back. They can't pay bills. And, these kids are on their own. But our team GPA is always hovering now between a 2.7 and a 2.9, not a 1.7 and a 1.9. And that's how you develop kids, by keeping them in your program, whether they start, whether they don't play. Like we've had plenty of kids who were in our program for 4 years. I know it's going to sound crazy to people, but who maybe never played a down of offense or defense as a starter. And I know that's hard for people to fathom, but those kids, man, they wanted to be there and they were great teammates and the teammates wanted them there, and I think that's also gets lost in today's world too. It's always about the star players and you never hear about the guys who contribute in other ways, so to speak, in the locker room.
What has been, and that kind of leads into like the change in recruiting over your tenure. And one of the beauties of asking this question is that you've been at the same place, so you can really see how it's affected, your program as well. From the time, like I started coaching high school football as an assistant in 2002 to now, amazingly, people are always like, how does football change so much? Even though it's the same sport, like what's being played between the lines is for the most part the same. How does all these things of recruiting change? And I say it's changed dramatically. It's like you used to get, When I played, it was 60 millimeter film. Then it went to VHS, then to DVDs in the early 2000s. Now Huddle has completely changed how fast you can get links and all those kind of things. But even more so, social media, Twitter, Instagram. How has recruiting changed, and what are like the things that you like about the new world and the things that you think you'd rather leave at home in the new world?
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously, Dave, it's a loaded question. But I think the number one thing in recruiting, it's still about people, right? It's still, no matter how much it's changed, no matter how much maybe stayed the same, it's about people. And I've said this now probably for at least 10 of the last 18 years as a head coach. Guys, no matter who's on my staff, and we turn over all the time just because of the money and this part-time salary. We coach people first and sports second. I'm going to coach someone's kid like I'm coaching my own kid. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean I'm not going to coddle you. It doesn't mean I'm not going to take it easy on you. It just doesn't mean I'm not going to berate you. I'm going to talk down to you. So when you talk about recruiting, I still think the number one thing we speak about, even though it's changed drastically, because the camps, man, it's like camps. And again, when you talk about that, those guys at the higher levels, they used to do maybe 3 or 4 camps. They had their own camp. Maybe they went or a guest coach at maybe 1 or 2 others. And then they had, June and July off. Now it's like they're at everything the whole month of June, 3 or 4 of their own camps. And my friends are like, they're around the country the whole month of June. And maybe they get 2 weeks off in July. So I think obviously the camps and me, the one thing that drives me personally crazy, the D3 offer thing. I think I did it once off season because, between my son, who was at the time maybe a freshman, it's like, Dad, guys love that. And I said, all right, I'll try it. My assistant coach is always saying, hey, we got to do this offer because everyone else is doing it. An offer to me is when I'm paying for your education. An offer is I'll be able to take care of your family financially. I'm offering you a roster spot, there's no doubt. And we have a restriction on our roster. So yeah, it becomes competitive. But to me, and this is just my personal belief on recruiting, like, if I don't offer you a graphic that says we're offering you a roster spot, and you don't want to come here, it goes back to the right fit again. You're not a right fit for us. So, and I say that in recruiting, that's one of the next things I'll say to parents in the room, like, hey man, we're not doing the photo shoot thing, even though my own kids and all my coaches say we're going to get you in uniform. We should do this and that, get the strobe lights out. I've never done something in my life just because other people have, except that one time with the graphic I just talked about. And I got away from it right away because I'm like, guys, this isn't us. I want to offer you something that you feel connected, that you feel that this is going to be a right fit, that you feel you're going to trust your coaches for 4 years to have your unequivocally back, no matter what we're talking about on the field, off the field. We're going to be there for you for the next 40 years when you graduate. That's what I want. I don't want an offer graphic. I don't want to do a photo shoot. And again, I'll even say that to parents, like, hey, we'll set up the backdrop with the Kean on it. And we'll put our Under Armour mannequins on there and say, hey, if you want to take a picture of mom and dad, you should. This is a great moment. Not everyone's getting to go on a recruiting visit. We're just not going to do the hoopla that comes with putting you in a uniform and all the strobe lights and those things. So those things have drastically changed because, again, why are we doing that? Social media, right? So 20 years ago, 40 years ago, the guys who played at Penn State and in Wisconsin and Miami from New Jersey, they didn't go through that because there was no social media. We just feel that those guys at the higher level have to again, right? Because you have to compete with what you're up against. Me, I'm not offering your family money. So in my mind, it's just like, all right, if this is not the right fit for you, and if that means that we didn't give you a graphic for your offer and we didn't give you a photo shoot, and that's why you're not picking us, it was never a right fit.
Yeah, that's I think the human interaction part of it is a huge thing too now so initially with social media, and I've seen this more and more with players just like from our club and stuff. And when they talk to me about the recruiting process, I'm sure high school coaches are going through the same thing. Because there's so many of these camps and there's so like you can walk into a Division III school and they have 1,000 kids, they're told all these schools are going to be there. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. And even if they are, I try to tell kids, you got to go to even camp wise, the right fit for you in the summer, because what happens is just because it says, I don't know, just because it says Rutgers or Syracuse or Pitt or whatever, Penn State, a school is going to be there, those guys have a deal with XYZ D3 school to be there. There's a reason that goes beyond what you'll understand what's going on for them to be there. Yes, if they find the guy, they're going to take him, no doubt. Okay. But with 1,000 kids, you're not making your odds real good, right? You could be a great player, literally a great player, but if you didn't walk in the door at 6'6", or you didn't blast the 4.4 40, it becomes a situation where you could have had a great day and you're like, then you come out discouraged. And I always said, you shouldn't come out discouraged. You should have chose a camp where you're going to have more opportunities. Find a camp where there's 100 or less guys there. If Kean was hosting a camp, or another Division III school is hosting a camp for players that are prospects that they're most interested in, you're not going to have 1,000 kids there. You might have maybe 150, 200 kids, but now the coaches can see you and have a personal interaction with you. And what they're really all craving, but they don't realize it because they're told so many other things. They're craving. It goes back to what you said in the beginning. Someone that really wants them to be a part of their program, and someone that they can trust to be around. And I understand, obviously, there's a wide variety of different coaches, but those are really the two things that they're really trying to figure out. They're just being told all this other stuff, right? They're being told this is what you should do. I don't want to name names of school, but all these 5,000 kids went to this school for a camp, this Division III school for a camp, and we should all go there, right? If you want to go there just because you want to compete, nothing wrong with that. You want to go there to compete. You want to go against other players that are good players. You want to get better. Those good. But if you want to get recruited, you got to ask questions of the schools that are interested in you as to, if I come to this camp, will I actually get an opportunity to get looked at? Will there be an opportunity for me to actually someone see me, say, you know what, I really like you. You got to improve this. You're not the right guy for me, for our program, or this is not the right fit for you. Those things are things that are acting. How can, I know you do it, and so you're not included in this. I know you do it, but how can more coaches create an opportunity where kids understand that, come to my school? Like, it might be a communication thing. I don't know. Like, Villanova does a great job at this. They have a smaller camp for FCS kids. A lot of those kids come out, they only offer kids that they think that they're interested in. You do the same thing. You bring on roster spots of kids that you really want to be there. How can they communicate that better to kids?
It's funny you say that, because even though we don't offer a graphic, right, we tell kids, like, what, how crazy the Division III world is. Like, it's a mass recruiting, right? So we probably look at somewhere between, on any given year, 1,000 to 1,200 kids, right? Film, visits, high school stops, whatever it is. We tell kids from jump, right? If we get you on campus for a visit, that's our offer. We want you, right? If we don't bring you on campus, we don't want you. And I think, like you said, the human interaction becomes big, because, again, that's our first step to establishing trust. We're telling you that if we bring you on campus for a visit with you and your family, that is our offer. And we'll repeat that again throughout that visit. Hey, we brought you here. This is a special day because this is our offer. You're not going to get a graphic, but if we're bringing you here, this is our offer to you. And again, we'll probably bring up, if we got to get 35 to 40 kids on any given year, the math usually tells me we have to bring anywhere up between 120, 150 to get 30% of whatever we need of those visits. Because, again, right fit financially, academically is just the right what you're looking for. So I think it does start with the human interaction again. I think it all starts with somewhere along the line. And again, I'm generalizing everybody, but we started mixing and mincing truths with, hey man, whatever we got to tell the kid, we got to get them right. And I don't know. I think at some point those things come to fruition and they can get noticed, whether, again, in your first preseason camp, in your first fall, in your first spring. Hey man, wow, maybe I'm not here for what originally was told. And I think that a lot of guys do that. I think there's a lot of, straight up guys, straight up shooters. Yep. Especially, when you're talking about, mom and dad have to pay sometimes $40,000, $50,000 for you to go to school. I think there's a lot of good dudes out there. I think we're talking about, minority. But I think it just starts with human interaction, being straight honest with them and genuine and sincere, because those things don't get lost. When you're genuine and sincere to people, like, those things come out to the forefront. And that's what I tell our coach all the time. Hey, maybe we can't offer them a great financial package, right? Maybe we don't have great academic packages for guys who we recruit, but what we can sell is that feeling of being real, genuine, and sincere when we have every communication with that kid, with that family, when we're in front of them. And at some point that does stand out, and then we'll get the right kid that we want. and whether or not you win games, that's just about, hey, how talented are you? Do you have the right kid in the right spot? Are you making the right play at the right time? But from the human side, I think that is the human interaction again.
Right. And that's something that I've taken away from you, Coach, was the people aspect of it. And really, I really took it in terms of just even, using it towards when I would go on a job interview. Everybody used to get all worked up about job interviews and whatnot. To me, it was always, this isn't a dog and pony show. I'm not going there to put a song and a dance on. Like, this is who I am. It's either the right fit or it's not. Otherwise, you go in there and you put on a dog and pony show, and now all of a sudden, now you get the job. Now you have to reenact that dog and pony show every single day for something that you really aren't. So at the end of the day, like, is it really the right fit, or are we only, delaying the inevitable of this isn't what it is? And, I tell my guys all the time, listen, the football part of this whole thing, the X's and the O's, that's the easy part. I can teach guys to tackle. I can teach all that stuff. Yeah, the talent needs to be there, but the hardest part is that off season and those interactions. And like you said, continuing to have the right fit with your players. And it might not be directly between you and the player. It might be an assistant coach that has that direct, maybe that has a little bit of a relationship to him. So just, you have to surround yourself, I think, with the right people. And I think that's the key to kind of how you sustain. I mean, listen, we can all be 1 year wonders and win something 1 year, 2 year, but the sustainability, how do you keep it going over that long period of time? I think that's where the interaction with people really turns into it, because, the kids see right through all the BS.
Absolutely. And I think that's so critical and you guys know, you've been around this a while. Dave's been head coach numerous spots. I think alignment is so under talked about. Like, I've been blessed, man. I've only had, so we don't have a full staff at Kean. So my full-time assistants for my first 13 years was one guy, Keith Miglerino. I love him like a brother. When I hired him as my full-time coach, he might have been 24 years old, and the AD said, we're not hiring this guy. The VP said, we're not hiring this guy. And I went to bat for this kid because I said, the number one thing that I want is someone I could trust and who's going to be loyal. I don't want a yes, sir. I don't want a robot. But, it was my first head coaching job. I'm 30 years old, 31 years old, college program in the state where I grew up. And I said, the number one thing for me is having a guy that I can unequivocally trust next to me. And then he leaves. And in 2014, I'm blessed to get that one spot split to two, and I've had Matt Kreider, my D coordinator, and Dave Galante, just two phenomenal human beings. And again, same thing, like those two are like brothers to me now. And that is so critical, because I know a lot of my friends who are on staffs, it's like, oh, offense hates defense, defense hates offense, linebacker coach hates running back coach. Man, at the end of the day, we win and lose together. So, I'm very fortunate to just be surrounded by great people. And it's just about the culture you want to set as a head coach. Like, for me, the number one thing for me is culture's purpose is to drive behaviors that win, right? Behaviors, because behaviors end up winning games for you, right? And talent does take over sometimes, there's no doubt. But in the long haul, 365, the long haul of it, there's 365 days. And you got a behavior modification, some guys, right? Because they're coming in, they're all the dudes from their school. That's the hardest part, getting them to understand that, hey, man, we're gonna have to modify behavior. You don't have to necessarily change it completely. You just got to tweak a mindset and attitude, just change it a little bit, because you're not going to be the guy right away. So for me, and I think that culture drives the expectation. And when you have behaviors, then that culture drives belief. And the expectations and beliefs drive that behavior every day, right? You talk about off season, you talk about spring ball, now how it changed, Dave. We didn't have spring ball back in 2003 or 4 earlier. It was just, workouts that you couldn't even have with your coach. Like, it was all with, like, on your own. And if the school was lucky to have a strength coach, you're able to do it. Now we have a strength coach. We have spring practice. We have 16 practices, throughout 3 practices a week. You're in a helmet, 1 practice you're in pads. I remember being told back when I first started Kean, we would never see a football in our non-traditional. And we went to a towel, and then we went for a football. And now you'll never see pads. And now we're in pads. But my thing is, that's a safety concern. So for me, that you can't play football without a helmet and shoulder pads. So how do you teach tackling, right, without a shoulder and helmet on and think you're going to be safe teaching it? You could, right? The helmet, you can talk about rugby tackle and all that. I understand. But for me, the game has changed so much, but culture hasn't. That's my thing, that they're going back to that culture. It all starts with culture. It drives your behaviors. It drives your habits. It drives your beliefs. It drives your expectations. And now it's about getting 125 guys, coaches and staff included, on the same page with culture. And the more you can be aligned with your assistant coaches, and the more they're aligned with you, that's how you sustain success. And true success isn't always the championships and wins. I've learned that over the years. That's why I'm gray. I try to keep it short on the side. But for me, it's, real success is about the people, the loyalty, the relationships, being able to get a phone call from a guy who graduated a few years ago and say, hey, coach, you want to get a workout in the morning? Hell yeah, I want to get a workout. I haven't seen you in a couple of years. Like those guys who want to call you, invite you to a wedding. Like, I know it sounds cliche, but as you get older, the 25-year-old back at Montclair State, hell, I thought I was going to be at Rutgers in 3 years, right? And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be an assistant for coach down there. But then you start realizing, hey, maybe that's not what you really want. And maybe you want to make an impact right in your own thing. And I remember back in the day, Dave, you remember George DeLeon used to do clinics in the Northeast all the time, Northeast Clinic. And I stayed, I was 19. It was actually 1999, my first year as a coordinator. And I knew his whole backstory with Pasqualoni and them guys. And I said, coach, I want to get to where you are. You started at Western Connecticut. You moved up and you've been at Syracuse forever. I said, how do I get to where you are? He said, you coach your beep off where you're at and people are going to take notice. And you just keep working and you just keep doing good things and people are going to take notice. And I'll never forget that. And that changed my mindset. I'm like, all right, I don't have to get to a Division I. And I didn't have a wife or kids yet either. I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to coach as best as I can, as well as I can, wherever I am. And that was it for me.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal. Coach DeLeon was one of the most genuine guys. I mean, even when he went to the NFL, like if he came around, he would still talk to you. He used to come up. Man, he recruited me back. I mean, this is so long ago, but he actually recruited me when I was at Saddlebrook High School, when he was at Syracuse with Pasqualoni, and I that relationship from the time. And this is what a lot of players don't understand. Even if you don't go to a place, they didn't end up offering me a scholarship at Syracuse, but they recruited me very, very deeply. They ended up offering another kid from Edison, who was a linebacker. I can't remember the name now, but he recruited me for a long time. We built that relationship, and it still went forward in years of coaching. Like when he would visit me when I was first a head coach at Saddlebrook, and I had Steve Maneri was my tight end, and he ended up going to Temple. And part of all those things were those relationships. D'Onofrio and who's obviously still around as a coach. But DeLeon used to come up and talk, and he didn't even want to, the first thing he would want to do is just, talk about you and talk about like literally like, what are you doing offensively and defensively now? Like and then talk about, some of the players that he might be interested after. Those things in football were some of the most important things to me as a coach for over the years. And those relationships, how does that, like, so someone who's been around for a little while like yourself, how do you continue to translate that to Galante and your assistants so they can carry that forward?
Yeah, I think it's easy, man. I think that, especially when you talk about Dave played for me, so Dave played at Kean and GA for me, and then went to GA at Rutgers, and then went out to Bucknell with Coach Susan, another great human being.
Yep.
And then came full circle and saw that world and want to come home. I think he, when you experience all those levels, right? You go from D3 and then you have a great appreciation. Wow, I'm in a Power 5 and living that life, and then going down to the 1AA level and seeing what they have there. I think he appreciated Division III even more because some of the things he had. And well, you're saying, well, how the heck can you appreciate it more? Well, you realize what you have is special, and not that the big guys don't have those relationships, because we all do. Like, you have the coach-player relationship, but it's just different, man. And I can't even maybe verbalize it, but he sees it. He sees it. He sees his friends who played for me and how they talk about Kean and their experience they had, and whether it be respect, pride, admiration, whatever words they use for me. He wants that, and I think every coach does, man. I think at the end of the day, Matt Kreider played at TCNJ, NJAC guy, G8 for me in 2011 and 12, part of our championship run. And he sees that. And then he went to high school, went back up to the North, and he came back to be my full-time assistant when he left. And again, same thing. I think when you're around and you get to see maybe different things and to come back, I think that was like, man, I want this. And I could see, Matt Kreider especially has a little baby now, just turned 1 year old. And he said, Coach, and I see what you do and how you balance the family and your job. And I want that. And he goes, maybe football, maybe more football in my life isn't necessarily a good thing, because we all get gulfed up by football, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's about choosing when and how to pull yourself away so your own family doesn't take a complete backseat, because August through December, potentially they're in the backseat all the time. So, trying to find that balance. I think that's how they do it. They see it firsthand. They know it's not just lip service. It's not just something that's hypocritical. They see it. They've been around it. They view it, and they hear other people talk about it. And then again, real and genuine, sincere. And I think that's what it is.
Right. And Coach, you can speak on it. And look, maybe it's because of, we're two fortunate guys that played for a coach who was in the same spot for a long time. Tremendous amount of respect. I mean, you're talking generations and generations of players that literally are talking about the same things that we are, where I just think, we are a little different than others because having played at Montclair State for Coach G, where he was a people person. Yeah, would he take some swings on some guys every now and then? But at the end of the day, listen, Coach was about being who he was ultimately, and kind of let us all know about this is how things are done. This is the way we go about it. And then just to see him firsthand, how he balanced his wife, his family, and you're talking somebody that was all in for so long, I think that put us a little bit at an advantage when it came to certain things. And, there are guys that have played for him who haven't done it that way, and that's all good for them. But you look at some of the majority of the guys that have had success in whatever they're doing after the fact, whether they're teaching, coaching, with their families, careers, it's just come from where we and how we were, how we were taught to play the game on and off the field. I think that's just an impact that not a lot of coaches have now, I think, to the extent that we do. Because guys, want to leave at the first hand when things are bad. They want to just, drop and run and kind of go from there. But I think that program that we came through at Montclair State with Coach G kind of changed and shaped all of us for the future.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And when you talk about those guys, I always think of it, I was playing, Montclair State to me was Richie Nicola, Richie O'Connor, Charlie Kakuza, Billy Johnson, right? And those guys were together forever.
Staple.
And before them, it was Moose. It was, God rest his soul, Coach Hill. So, those guys were so aligned for so long. I mean, it just was like that was the four horsemen, so to speak, as the 80s and the 90s, and those guys were together forever. So
right, and those runs, those guys it was that same group, and so we grew. That's what we saw. We didn't know that wasn't the norm, right? We assumed that every year we come back, it's the same coaches, the same people, right? For the most part, the core nucleus. These are our beliefs. This is how it works, and that's not the way of the world.
No, and then again, when you're 18, 19, 20, 21, you don't know what you don't know. And as Dave said earlier, it's not rare that to be somewhere for 21 years, but hell, nowadays it's certainly uncommon. And like I said, I don't ever want to. I'm never going to run because we're losing. I'm never going to jump ship because we're winning. As a Montclair guy, I know the running joke is with the Montclair guys. All those jokes that you guys have back in the day with me at Kean, but that's also a common denominator. That also connects us because of that. So. I found a home. The home found me, whatever you want to say, but it's been a hell of a ride, and it's going into year 21, and I wouldn't change anything.
No, that's really what you guys have is unique. Because I mean, where I played at UConn, we did not have that. I was there. I was recruited. I don't even know if you would remember this name, but Tom Jackson was our head coach at UConn, and he was fired at the end of my redshirt freshman year, and then Skip Holtz came in and then turned around the program. And then after he left, he was there for my last 3 years, and but then he moved on, and then after that, Randy Edsel came in and to the program. But it was totally different atmosphere. It was like that atmosphere. You knew something was going to happen. I remember playing because I started out as a fullback. And I remember playing as a redshirt freshman and playing knowing that if we don't win this last game, which would have gave us the championship, we end up losing. And we didn't win the what was it at the time? The Yankee Conference Championship. We lost to BU. We knew he was going to be gone. I remember what that was like. You were every play you were living on. And not only were you living on it, but obviously the coaches were, because they didn't know what would happen to them and their careers after that. And then Skip Holtz came in, and it was a different environment just because he was going to have a certain amount of time to have a chance to be successful. But it was also, I also learned what it was like to no longer be wanted. I had to prove myself to get on the field, which I was able to do. but I was not wanted. I was not his guy. I was Tom Jackson's guys, right? And that was something that, and that's why it really radiates with what you said, because I remember that experience. I remember having to prove myself, knowing that maybe I may never play. I was a starter as a redshirt freshman, and I may never get on the field again. Luckily enough, I was good enough to be able to get on the field and start again. But I remember that feeling. It was a feeling of desperation. What do I do? What am I going to do if I don't get on the field again? Because what do I have to do to prove that I'm good enough? Knowing that he was going to bring in more guys to take any job that I possibly could have. And even when I was a starter, and I love Skip Holtz, he was great to me. Even when I was a starter, you knew that you had to play well because your job could go. And then obviously that goes through anything in football. There's always a guy that could take your job, but players understanding how important it is that someone's by your side, whether you're the starter or not. This person's an advocate for you. This person wants you to be successful. And that stuff made me stronger as a player. I think it helped me as a coach. But it was something you really had to learn. I think the experience that you guys have with Coach Giancola and obviously players that play for you now is a treasured experience that can teach you a lot of things about what kind of people you want to be around. Where the experience that I had is probably similar to a lot of players' experiences now, because there's such coach turnover. Whereas, they have to kind of constantly get this feeling of figuring it out on their own, right? And I think that that's important. And the reason why I emphasize that point, because these are things that, to me, I've learned that really have to be valued. Like, you have to value someone that's in your corner, whether you start or not. No one can promise you you're going to be the starter, but that someone's in your corner, and that's rooting for you to be successful, not just a football field, but in life. They want you to be successful in life, right? You don't have to prove that to them. I know long-winded for me to get to a question, because that's just how I am. But what do you tell players that are interested possibly in going to Kean and possibly coming to play for you? What is the best way for those guys to get in touch with you, get to know you, your staff, the university? What is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I think, when you're not talking about camp season, I think the number one way is, either emailing us. All our stuff is on Kean.edu athletics, and you can go to any of our coaches and email myself, Coach Galante, Coach Kreider. Obviously, the other way is Twitter, Coach Garrett, 53, Coach Galante, Coach Kreider. I mean, the DMs, as much as I hate them, I'm definitely more of an email / text guy than DMs. Trying to keep up with the DM inbox is crazy. But I think it starts with a simple email. And then again, how you construct that email, right? Because like the guys who say, "Hey, Coach Garrett, Garret, I delete. If the guys that spell with one R or two T's,
right,
or one T and two R's, I stop reading. Because if you can't care enough to spell my name right in the first 3 words, I can't care enough to read your email. And I'm just being honest. Or if they say, "Hey, Coach Garrett, I really, really look forward to playing for you at Rowan," and it's a generic email, they just couldn't even take the time to change the school, I hit delete.
And that's something, Coach, I think in your terms, right? Like, even not to cut you up, but like even your, right, like at that Division III level where you don't have 5 GAs that are sitting here running through your DMs, going through your, like, you have to have a filtering process. And you're talking about right fit, right type of stuff. Like, this is kind of how I have to do it. Like, here's the initial filter. I have all of these 1,000, whatever. If you can't spell my name right, dude, you might run a 4.4, be able to run, jump all over the place. But sorry, man, I don't have the time. I don't have this is what it is.
Yeah, there's no doubt we don't have the resources. We don't have the computer software that auto generates the responses to 1,000 recruits. It's Kreider, me, Galante, all, taking time to either individually email you back or individually hit you a DM back, whatever it might be. So we have to have a filtering process, because again, if you can't care enough, you're not the right fit for us, because there's a certain way we want to go about it. And, that's just it. So, those things are really how we do it, Dave. I mean, and that's how people can get a hold of us. And obviously camp season is different. I think the best thing about camp season, any kid that always comes up to me, I don't care, we've had the studs come up. We've had the kids who maybe can't play at us. Any kid that comes up to the end of camp and says, thanks, coach. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your coaching. Thanks for whatever. I tell every kid, my oldest kid down to my 8-year-old, before every practice, whether it's Little League, whether it's basketball, soccer, you go thank your coaches because they're donating their time. And maybe it's different mindset for a camp, but those kids stand out. We'll remember that kid, and we'll talk about that kid. Well, hey, remember that kid from Saddle River that came over after the Rutgers camp and said, thanks, coach? Hey, man, he was pretty good. Maybe he's a tweener, but that kid, it's not always about talent, man. It's not always. We've taken kids with lesser talent and developed 4 years down the road to be a player for us. It's some people don't have the patience to develop. They want to play right now, but at the end of the day, you're really about development of a player, and that's our job, coaching people, but getting them to motivate to develop to be their best they possibly can be with reaching their potential is what we talk about. So those things we remember.
Also about fitting into a role, right? Like, hey, I get that you were a starter here, or you caught this many touchdowns over here, or hey, man, maybe you might be a good safety, or maybe, hey, your job is to just, this is your role on kick return, or hey, go block this punt, right? Like to get those guys from being the dude to now being part of something bigger, ultimately to win, I think is huge.
I think it's huge too. And earlier I talked about behavior modification. In preseason camp, the last thing we do every night, we practice. We get up in the morning, mandatory breakfast. We have special teams meeting at 7:45. We have practice at 9:15. Then they get lunch, then rehab, weight room, walkthrough, then dinner. But at 7 o'clock every night, we have a player manual, and I'll go through our player manual to hit on those topics. One every night there's a different topic. Maybe one night's about loyalty, one night's about rolling, one night the behavior modification, trust, teamwork, whatever it is. But we'll sit in a room after all that long day, and it's really about trying to just change their mindset a little bit because they're so used to being the guy. And we say you don't have to be the man, but you have to be a man. A man decided to come here and play college football. A man has a responsibility to not just himself now, but his teammates. A man does what he's not necessarily always what he wants to do, right, Dave? We don't always want to do things as a husband, a father, but we do them because we have the responsibility to do them. So those topics we'll hit on every night between 7 o'clock at night and 7:45. And is it weird for some freshmen who walk into that every year? I'm like, man, what am I doing? Sitting in this room, listening to this guy talk. And I don't expect the freshman to get it right away. Hell, sometimes I don't expect them to get it their whole freshman year, but I expect them to sit in that room as a sophomore and now be like, okay, it's clicking. And then junior year and senior year, they're leading the reins. Like they're taking the truck and they're driving it, and they understand fully what we want from our culture. So there's definitely a transition, but that behavior modification, attitude adjustment, whatever you want to call it, you have to be able to talk about that. We have 110 guys on our team and only 22 are going to start.
Right. And you're different, right? Because does the NJAC still cap camp?
We cap it at the NJAC caps it at 125, but Kean caps it at 108.
So 125 for the NJAC, 108 for you specifically, where Mount Union can go and bring in 210 kids.
They might be able to be 400 if they want.
Wow.
So I did
not know that.
Oh yeah. Coach Schumann, that's something that we've dealt with. It was always an issue. And I believe if it's still the way it used to be, say you set that roster at 125, right? Let's say 5 of those guys get hurt, another 5 quit. You can't replace them on the roster. Your 125 is your 125.
I never knew that.
It's not like you can have 10 guys that are on, the PUP list, and all of a sudden this guy goes down and you can just roll this guy out in the middle of the season. That's why it was always such a big thing. Because listen, you have 3 quarterbacks, 2 of them go down, you only got 1. You better start looking for what receiver played quarterback in high school, which happened to me my very first year at Montclair State. We ended up not having a quarterback just because of the way the roster is, right? Like one kid just couldn't come back because of financials. They didn't get a couple recruits that fell through last minute. So now you're sitting there with, an athlete being your punter because you can't go recruit a punter. So the NJAC does the NJAC's a little different.
I never realized that Mount Union could
whoever.
So then you got to compete with them if you go to the playoffs. So you have to compete with a group that has a lot more people to choose from. That's because obviously we got
27 receivers and we got 7.
Yeah. Obviously FCS and FBS, everyone has the same amount of guys that they can bring in, and I never realized.
Yeah, D3 depending on what league you're in.
Yeah. And now take it to a different level, Dave. Put your coaching hat on for a minute and think about now you're going out to 300 schools in New Jersey. You're trying to show face and be the state school to go and say, hey, I want to make sure I get in your building. But now you're only bringing in 35 kids because you can't bring in more. And then when you tell the coach, and some coaches get it, some coaches don't. Hey, coach, we don't have room for this guy. Well, he's a good player. I know he's a good player. But, for us, it's just a matter of, when you talk about roster restrictions, how we do it is, all right, if Dave Schumann visits and Derek visits, but Dave doesn't say yes to me right away, but Derek visit after Dave and Dave says yes to me, and he took that last safety spot. Well, if Dave comes back in April and says, hey, I want to come to you, Dave, I'm sorry, I don't have room. And then the high school coaches are calling, but that's where it gets crazy because we are limited. We don't have full reign. We have a roster cap, and that's it.
That's very interesting. I never realized that at the Division III level, especially the
Well, it's not like that at some. It's not at all Division III. It's league specific,
right? And I'm guessing that some of the schools, like even like the private schools, who just try to bring in as many kids as they can because it increases their enrollment in the school, right? So, like I don't know, like an Allegheny maybe, or used to be schools like that. I mean, I don't know if they do that anymore, but. Interesting. I never realized that. Wow, that makes it.
It's a game changer in terms of play. You know what I'm saying? Like at least in the NJAC, everybody has that limitation. But once you get to the playoffs and you start seeing some of these other teams that are outside of that NJAC, and they can have. They can replenish the roster throughout the year. Every time somebody gets hurt, just this guy's back. Here comes another, and just kind of roll with it.
Do you guys? I know in the old days you had more transfers, but I don't know if with the transfer portal that affects you. I'm not as familiar with the transfer portal at the Division III level. How has that affected things you guys do?
Yeah, I think everyone thinks that's the quick answer. Go to the portal, and we certainly have. But here's what happens, right, Dave? And you know this from what you do. If a kid's in the portal from UConn, that kid's not looking to go to Kean or Montclair. That kid's looking to go to Marshall or Miami of Ohio or Buffalo, or maybe he's trying to get to Wisconsin or Penn State.
Right.
So when you reach out to those kids, some of them are polite and like, hey, coach, now I'm really trying to get a scholarship. Or other kids, don't.
Some of them laugh in your face. Yeah.
Yeah, because the portal really is and listen, it has served us in a very, very small percentage. But still to this point, I think transfers, at least from my experience right now, as much as we try to hit the portal and see who's available, especially from New Jersey, I think it comes back down to the human element again. Those guys tell their boys, if I'm coaching Coach Derek and he's a safety on my team, and his boys at Sacred Heart, or his boy who he knew from another high school still talks to him on Twitter, he'll be like, yo, man, why don't you come here because da-da-da-da. And his experience at our place then sells it. It's not even the portal. Like we've got some guys coming in who played in either, the CAA or Power 5 schools transferring in this year. And nothing to do with the portal. Everything to do with, hey, man, my boy told me to hit you up because I'm leaving and I want to come. I'm like, all right.
Coach, I also think that, and this is kind of where this new transfer portal and whatever type of thing is coming about, is I think that now, let's say that kid, right? Okay, you didn't get that kid coming out of high school, right? But you went about the process with him correctly. You were honest with him. You said, hey, whatever I can do for you in the future, please let me know. Now, these guys go away. That pretty picture that was painted isn't so much. That bounce back, where am I going to go? Where did I feel, you know what? That coach made me feel comfortable. And now let me reach out to him and see that situation. So like you said, I think at the end of the day, people matter. That relationship matters. We all have to recruit our own rosters now, whether it be high school. I mean, Dave sees it in the youth stuff with his 8-year-old kids going from this team to that team to this team. It's craziness, right? But in my eyes, at the end of the day, those relationships that you established with those guys, and now, hey, maybe they're going to bounce back. Maybe they have a grad year where they're just, hey, I'm not sure what I want to do. I want to figure it out. Let me go play ball. Like you said, with a coach that cared about me, maybe with one of the boys that I've stayed close with, and he says it's all go. You know what I mean? This is really what it is, to get that perspective of, hey, this is really how it works. I think that stuff's it gives you so much more when you do it that way.
Yeah.
Mike, yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, my quick thought on the transfer portal for Division III, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. is that in the old days when they went down a level and they didn't lose a year, that was an advantage to go to a Division III school. Like,
correct, because you could play right away.
I remember back when I played, like there were guys that went to really high levels that were playing at Rowan, that were playing at Kean, that were playing at Montclair.
Always.
Like, Division I bona fide all-state guys, you know.
A lot of our roster at Montclair were bounce back guys that came back from Monmouth, from Rutgers, from Syracuse, from any of those big schools. And obviously, like, you know, Coach G was just the guy that just he knew when they went off that they would be back, right? So he just kept that relationship, stayed steady. And then when those guys he had heard through the grapevine or somebody on our roster was like, hey, my boy that went to Syracuse is coming back. Now
we made a living off of it back when he was at Rowan, you know. My thought is that
talk about the original transfer portal.
Right,
there it is right there.
My thought is that the transfer portal does not work as well as it used to work. Well, I wasn't a transfer portal, but as it used to work better for D3s in the older days under the old system, versus now it's you actually have to deal with maybe more headaches, because the old days they were grateful to have an opportunity to come to Kean. Like, it didn't work out at Penn State, but now I can start right away at Kean, right? That same person at Penn State is no longer like, hey, I want to go to Kean. They made it a disadvantage. And I didn't think about it. We just started talking about it. But really, it sounds to me that it made it almost of a disadvantage for the Division IIIs.
Because now it's like you look at it and it's like, oh, in my eyes, I see them looking at it as a lateral move, right? Like, okay, I wasn't good enough to play at this Power 5, but that doesn't mean I'm not good enough to play at that Power 5, right? So now you're going from here to here, whereas now, you know, back in the day it was, I can't go there because the rules won't let me play right away, so I have to go down in order to play. Now that stuff doesn't happen as much.
And I'm going to take it even. I'm going to go deeper here just because I'm in it. Dave's right though. Back in the 90s, you know, people were more grateful to say, all right, I'm sitting at wherever, and I'm going to transfer back to Montclair, Rowan, Kean, wherever it is in the NJAC, and I'm going to go be a dude. Now, you know, again, social media didn't exist. It's all glorified and personified on this social media where people feel they got to compete, and if I go down, my value goes down. I'm not as good anymore, which, you know, whatever. I don't necessarily agree with it, but, you know, I think that has a lot to do with it because everything is so social media driven, and your value, like people put so much value on themselves in how many, whether it be a star or whether the level, whatever it might be, you know, you can put whatever behind it. And they see themselves, well, I don't want to go down because then everyone on social media is going to know I'm down and I don't want to be there. As opposed to saying, I'm going to go down, be grateful. I'm going to go be an ass kicker there for the next 3 or 4 years or 2 years, whatever.
Right. Win 2 titles, make a run in the playoffs. Like,
because they think you're going to be in the NFL. That's the bottom line. To me, like, see, I remember Gus Ornstein going from Notre Dame to Rowan, right?
Stud.
And he still got to go to the NFL. It wasn't like that went away, right? It was now Gus Ornstein actually got to throw a pass because at Notre Dame he was never throwing any passes there, and that's just one of like
a zillion they had it.
Oh yeah, a zillion stories. I'm sure you hear about that stuff.
Yeah. And look, the guy who went and played at what's the school? It starts with an H in New York. That's in the NFL now. He's a guard.
Hobart.
Yes, I mean so.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a ton of those
realize
stories.
The NFL. If you don't play the NFL, you're definitely not going to get your chance to the NFL. I mean, I don't know. To me, that's the thought process. Like, hey, you have to actually get on the field. You know, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think you know, you said something. Dee said something earlier about when you started talking about again, whether it be Coach G or Casey Keeler, wherever it is. Like when you talk about those guys going away, I think it starts with the one word we all use all the time in our position is leadership, right? And what's leadership? Leadership is influence. So when you talk to that kid, you know he might go away. Leadership we started defining as its actions, words, and attitude. The best leaders, right? Your words marry your actions, but then your attitude's felt in such a positive or like such a demanding way. Like, man, all right, and that guy really means something to me, right? So there's validity there. There's some substance there. It's not just he said this and I saw him act like that, and then his attitude was, you know, when your words, actions, and attitude marry up, it's like a trifecta, man.
Yeah, it's what you're putting into your shake. You know what I'm saying? Like, what ingredients am I putting in? And those are really what it is. There are certain guys when you sit down in the office and and you're across that table from that coach or whoever, even if you're having the conversation on the field, like there are guys where you just feel it, like it. You're like, damn, this guy brings the juice, right? Like he's all. It don't matter. Sometimes it don't even matter what's coming out of his mouth, but you have that feeling, right? Now you add what's coming out of the mouth to match up with the juice and all that stuff, and then when all that gets aligned, now you're really cooking with gas. But I think you have to have each one of those things in order to fully grab the guy that you really want.
Yeah, because the days of when Dave was, and I'm older, but the days of as a coach, do as I say, those days are gone.
Yep, that cookie cutter mentality of like, hey, no, everything. Why? Well, why?
Yeah, do as I
why?
do.
Right? And these guys, they have access to so much more, right? So, well, coaches tell me to do it this way. Let me go on here and let me check and see if this is the right way to do it. Well, all right. What are we working? What are we talking about? If you don't trust me enough to understand what I'm saying is kind of or that, then we're already, you know what I mean? Now we got more work to do, or this isn't the right fit. So it's kind of that work in progress. But I think that trifecta of like all those things that kind of go into everything, I think that's what really brings you forward.
And it builds that word trust again.
Yeah.
Well, trust covers it all.
Trust definitely covers it all. No, there's no doubt about it. Well, on that note, I guess I could talk to you all day. I could talk to you for 8 hours straight. I don't want to take more of your time.
Coach, appreciate
it's so
you.
Fascinating. It really is fascinating. And, especially talk to a college coach and, we're around the kids. It's important, I think, for them to hear things from someone who not only has been around it for a while, but has had stability, has had success, has grounded values, because ultimately, like what we want our players to be, if they get to play football forever, great, but ultimately they're going to do other things, and we want them to be able to be able to have the right values, to be able to be successful, and to be able to identify them, right? To be able to identify, I can't believe I'm saying it, but like to be able to identify good values in another person, but I want them to be able to do that more and more.
Yeah, and Dave, this because again, as older statesman, Derek, you're getting there in your age. This sport that we've been so blessed to be around as a player and coach and be around it every day. There's no better vehicle to teach life lessons, in my opinion, than this great game, because it when you get too high, it's going to knock you down, and you're going to figure it out. And when you're not having good times, and you got to be able to persevere and be resilient and get gritty. It's just constant, and when you think you arrived, you better freaking understand and recognize no chance, because that race ended and a new one started right back up. So It's like this great thing to learn from, and I'm still learning. I mean, every day I'm learning from this game, and it's such a blessing to be involved and be in the role that I am.
Thanks, Coach, for coming on. What's your Twitter again? Just so they if I know you don't want to get too many DMs, but in case I want to flood your DM for you.
I'm at the point now, Dave. If I don't check it, I'll give out the wrong damn thing. So it's at Coach Garrett 53. My Twitter's at Coach Garrett 53.
Perfect. Thanks, Coach, so much for being on, and obviously we'll see you soon. But thanks so much. Best of luck this season,
Dude,
Coach. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too, man. Keep doing the good things out there. Appreciate you guys.
Talk soon, Coach. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye. That was phenomenal.
Good dude, right?
Oh yeah, that's it.
You've known him forever, but just to hear, I've heard all of that. You know what I mean? Like, and I know all that stuff because that's just been my relationship with him from the jump. And that was based off nothing more than, did he recruit me a little bit in high school? Yeah. But that's pretty much a relationship from 3 years of playing against him as an opposing coach. And then literally just like first coach's clinic I ever saw him at, hey, Coach, how you doing? And that was it, off and running, And it was just a matter of staying close and like I can reach out and he'll tell you anything. And like I said, it's a good perspective because He's got a son that's been through the recruiting process now. You know what I mean? Coming from the kid played at a big school you know what I'm saying? Like it's a reputable height, whatever. He's got a middle schooler. He's got another young one, right? So he's balancing. He's got 3 kids, a wife who has a full-time gig. You know what I mean? Like the back and the life stuff on top of the football stuff, you know? And then you got to hear a little bit about like, well, why didn't you ever go somewhere else? Because, you know, this is a jumping spot, right? And he's like, it wasn't really for me. You know, he's more about relationships than wins and losses.
It's refreshing to
see that there are, and look, but you know, the great thing about him too is that I love is that, look, he doesn't do it that way, but he also doesn't bash anybody that does do it the other way.
Yeah.
And like, he's not one of those. He knows guys are saying whatever to other people and all that kind of stuff, but like, that's just not him. And that's not how we do it at Kean. So you know what? If that's not what you're looking for, you don't come here.
Everybody's values are different, and
100%.
He doesn't judge someone else's values, right? Even though you may not agree with them, but
correct. But you're also not shunning them, and like no, it's I think he works very much so on a case by case basis, right? You're looking at some people, you know, in terms of whatever. Like I've seen him take a chance on some kids that nobody else would have given a chance for. You know what I'm saying? And then I've seen also him just say, you know what, that's not for us. That's not the right situation.
A couple things I learned that I did not know. Number one was, although I don't know if you're cutting out here for some reason. For some reason you're freezing up. I don't know what happened here. Oh, are you back? Or you not? Or am I freezing up? Why am I freezing up?
You're freezing up. I can't.
Am I freezing up?
You're frozen right now.
I'm frozen. What? But you can hear me.
I can hear you.
All right. Well, I'll say this. Well, as long as you can hear me, that's all that matters. I guess.
Yeah.
Number one, I never realized that the number of players that was different, between you guys and let's say a Mount Union, right?
And it used to be way worse.
And then number two, it came to me as we were talking. Hadn't even thought about it, even though I've been dealing with all this transfer portal stuff. I hadn't even thought about it.
The bounce back for D3.
How much it really is
because now because remember they used to go there because that was their options, right? Like they didn't have any other options, Dave. Because nobody wanted to sit out or nobody wanted to do that. So you just go back to your D3 school and you were like, when you got there, you were jazzed. You're like, yes, let's go. Now these guys,
no, they don't want to go. Or the rare guy.
You need D3. Like I just played at Rutgers. I'm gonna go play at Montclair. Then you walk in and then those guys that actually do. You want to talk about an eye-opening experience? Like I hope you got your own gloves, buddy, because this ain't Rutgers where you walk in and say, "Let me get a new pair." Like it don't work like that, you know.
Yeah, those were two real eye-opening things. And then the third thing was I knew this, but I didn't think about it until we were actually talking about your experience and Coach Garrett's experience as players, stability versus my experience really wasn't I was not stable. My experience,
which is incredible for both of us to talk about because it's not the way of the world, dude. Like we played for a coach who was he was on that staff in some way, shape, or form for over 35 something years.
Amazing.
You know, same person, same thing. And like, he was very much a player's coach. Never heard the guy yell.
Yep.
I never heard him raise his voice. I never heard him curse. You know, he wasn't that guy. It was Moose. This is what it is. This is how it goes. And believe me, there were times when my man needed to curse. You know what I'm saying? Like he needed to just unload and let it fly. Look, to me, this explains the type of person he was. Pre-game, right? Hey guys, take a knee, bow your heads, and it was pray to whoever you pray to. That was it. That's all it was. Or if not, don't pray, right? But that was how I saw him. He was, hey guys, we're all a bunch of individuals. Talk to whoever you got to talk to. And then when you're done, here's where we are. And now we're going out as a team, right? So allowed you to be an individual, but also stay part of the group. And I think that's where, to me, that type of coaching separates itself to allow you to be your individual, allow you to kind of do your own little thing, but also like push that envelope a little bit, you know, but know that I'm here to care as a coach, right? Like, cause it wasn't just whatever X's and O's football stuff. Coach G wanted to know, what's going on with life. How's dad? How's mom? You know what I mean? Like, how's your sister doing? All that kind of, he knew that about everybody on his roster. So for the two of us to have the same coach, and it wasn't just our head coach, right? It was the other position guys that were pretty much in place too. And kind of a lot like him, right? Like he fought for that. He fought for Miggs to be his assistant because he knew this is a guy that I need, right? And then split that to two, and now he's got Galante and his DC, who's a great dude. Like those guys.
Where's Miggs at now?
What's that?
Where's Miggs at now?
Miggs is high school, I believe. I don't think he coaches anymore. I think he's just a administrator.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
He was at Northern Highlands.
That was the.
He took the Northern Highlands job, I believe, and then
he was the head coach in Northern Highlands when I was in Indian Hills, right?
Correct, right. And then I think he went into administration. That's
right.
Right. Which is, in all honesty,
because he was originally a Bosco coach too, right? When he left.
No, well, he went to Bosco.
He went to Bosco.
He's an alum from there.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I remember sitting next to him.
Great dude, great coach, phenomenal. But listen, and that would be something that I would love to talk about, that aspect in terms of, when you talk to him about his coach, you heard him talk about it. My coaching staff turns over all the time because it's just with the money and nobody's a full timer. I'd love to hear his skew on like which assistants he thought were, whether it was like a younger guy who had never experienced college, whether it was like, because he gets a ton of former high school head coaches, right, that get out of a program. And then, right, I would love to hear like what works the best. I knew what he was. I know what he'll say. He'll say, "Oh, just a guy that loves football and loves kids and da da da." Like, right, well, he's great with that. But I mean, also like Kean's not exactly. It's gotten way better than it used to, but reputation wise, academically, like location wise, just to get people there to that, nobody wanted to go there.
No, I remember. Well, it did help when he got the facilities. Was a nice big addition.
The school itself too, right? Like everything, like it's not like a commuter school like it used to be anymore. There's dorms, there's that whole kind of stuff. I think a lot of that goes into it. But
I think. You know James Feely? He used to do my line stuff for me for a million years for. I think James Feely and Guy Bertolo were GAs for, I forgot. I think they were GAs for a coach at one point.
Well, I'll tell you, I've seen Coach change a lot, right? And I wouldn't say a lot, but he talked about being a 25-year-old, like I know it. I mean, he got that. I'm not saying he wasn't deserving of it, but he got the head coaching. He got the head coaching job at Kean because there was an issue. Like the other guy got fired.
Yeah, I remember that. I think
right, like there were some issues or whatever, and then they just kind of and then they kind of went with him. So he was kind of like thrown to the fire, and kind of just, how do I figure this out? And I can remember, he used to go about it one way where he was like big in he took a lot of transfers, a lot of 1-year wonders, right? I mean, he talked about the team GPA being below a 1.9. Like that's incredible. That's like California penal. Like those are like the dudes that got off the bus at Necessary Roughness, right? Like with this shotgun. Like, okay, we're gonna go scrimmage now. Like, whoo. But I can remember that dude he was talking about from West Virginia that bounced back. That was not fun trying to tackle that dude.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah, it comes full circle. Yeah, Coach
21 years.
Coach Garrett must be about 5 years older than me, maybe a few.
And he was because I think I want to say when he was he was a hell of a player too at college.
Right. He had a little like tackling records.
Yeah, like D-line, like, and they were known. I mean, obviously Montclair State's was known for their defense.
Sam Mills was the 70s, so he was probably
he was earlier, but he talks about playing for Bill Johnson, right? Like Coach Jay, and that was who I learned defense from my first 2 years of coaching because he was at Passaic Valley, so that's who I learned defense from. And I mean, he talks about like that's where he learned it from, So I mean, it's just he's just a great dude. He really is. And to be at a program like that for that long, sustain it, to a point where everybody knows, hey, he's a good dude. It's a good place. If this is what you're looking for, there's nobody better to play for.
Absolutely. All right, we'll let it go. That was great podcast. Good. And I know you got the guests loading up, so we'll have some more good ones to do.
People are asking me now.
Well, you know what? The podcasts have been so great so far. Just
People are asking me.
our interaction has been great. The interaction with the guests has been great. We're letting them speak, which is hard for me and you. And then
This mute thing works well.
what's that?
The mute button works so good.
It does work good. Actually, it stops talking from yeah, right. All right. Well, till next time. It was a great podcast.
Sounds good.
I got
Thanks,
a
guys.
clip from this one and the last one. We'll get them out soon.
Perfect.
But we'll see you all soon.
Later.